So while I was recording this video, I stumbled across an article talking about the huge weekend drop for Spider-Man Homecoming. Now this video is going to seem a little disjointed because originally I wanted to just talk about the fickle nature of geek culture and how it reflects on Spider-Man Homecoming's return and now the way it's being perceived, even though last week it was being loved by everyone. So I'm going to start this video a certain way, and then it's just kind of tonally shift. So instead of making two separate videos that really are just going to confuse people, I just made this as one big, longer, coherent video. So I hope you enjoy this, and again, thank you in advance. So this comes from Forbes.com. Sony's Spider-Man Homecoming isn't remotely a flop, yet the $175 million budgeted Marvel Cinematic Universe entry earned another $45 million in its second weekend of release, and that has now earned $208.27 million in 10 days. But the film did drop 61% in its second weekend, identical to the second weekend drop for Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And that $45 million weekend figure from a $117 million opening weekend is identical to the $45 million third weekend of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002, and the second weekend of Spider-Man 2, off an $88 million Friday through Sunday, $180 million Wednesday through Monday debut in 2004. Side note, Spider-Man 1 broke the world record for quickest movie opening to $100 million. It was in the Guinness Book of World Records for quite a while. Maybe just a year, but I distinctly remember getting that year's Guinness Book of World Records, and the pose of Spider-Man on the flagpole was in the book, and I got excited. So, back to the article. So unless it catches up over the next month, and that's not even remotely out of the question, we're looking at an identical multiplier to The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. That will lead to a domestic total almost identical to the $262 million cumulative total of The Amazing Spider-Man back in 2012. And adjusted for inflation, it will be noticeably fewer tickets sold than the 2012 reboot. And if the second weekend figure holds up, the 61.3% drop will be the worst ever for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I find it funny that this is the case, because everyone and their uncle swears that they're a big Spider-Man fan. They want it a certain way, so the studio listens, and you get a movie that's kind of divisive and kind of weird. Opinions aside on the film, it was poorly marketed. I'm a big Spider-Man fan, like a ridiculously huge level of Spider-Man fan, and I thought this movie had shit marketing. Trailers gave away too much. Trailers fucking sucked. The posters were hot garbage, all of them. Not just the one with Iron Man and the Skyscape or whatever, and everyone's trying to defend it. Well, all the Marvel posters are shitty. Not all the Marvel posters are shitty, but this one is the worst. The trailer just had the wrong tone. It made me think that this was going to be a stupid tween comedy, which I don't know why they're trying to market to tweens. They don't market the other Marvel movies to tweens, and the hype is huge and the returns are huge. I guess Sony just doesn't get it. Like, maybe Spider-Man started out as a teenage character, but everyone of every age can enjoy him. That is where this is happening. It's funny that everyone's going on, oh, it's, this is, the greatest Marvel movie to date, and this and that, but less people are going to see it. Now, I would put a Duke's brother bet that Infinity War is going to blow this out of the water. I'd say Thor has a good chance of doing better than this film domestically. And I'm not even going to use the caveat of, well, it will drop less in its second weekend. I think Thor will debut at number 1, and it will maintain that spot until Justice League comes out 2 weeks later, to which Thor will drop to number 2. But Justice League will never see the same level of success as Thor, because I believe it's 2 to 3 weeks after that Star Wars comes out. And another thing, Thor comes out before Thanksgiving. I believe Justice League comes out the Friday before Thanksgiving. So we're going to have the hype of Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and the excitement for the Christmas season. It's going to kind of push the thought of Justice League out of the public's mind, as well as the excitement for Star Wars, which, fuck Episode 7. People are still going to line up to see Episode 8. So I think Spider-Man will remain the lowest performing MCU film of the year. We had Guardians come out, and now this, and then we'll have Thor. And Guardians was a better movie, I guess. But this was still fun, and I hope Thor just blows my socks off. So, that's all I really wanted to say about the drop. I'm going to go away now, and I'm going to let you listen to the video I recorded earlier about the fickle nature of geekdom and how it's going to hurt Spider-Man Homecoming. Hey everybody, I wanted to make this real quick video because I was reading an article on Spider-Man Homecoming, and it really made me think about something. The hypocrisy of nerd culture. Now I'm not calling you, the listener, a hypocrite, but the culture in general, because I found an article that is titled Spider-Man Homecoming doesn't measure up to the 2004 masterpiece, which is an opinion I do agree upon, but I've noticed that there's a flux of these types of articles coming out now that Spider-Man Homecoming has had a huge drop. See, before I actually read the article, I'm just going to put the opinion out there first. A change for once. It seems like everyone had high hopes for this, and they were invested in it emotionally. And once it didn't perform the way they wanted to, they abandoned ship, and they kind of brushed it aside. I've never seen such fickle support happen so fast. Or should I say a lack of support. Because 2 weeks ago, this movie was on everyone's tongue, and last week everyone says it was the greatest Spider-Man movie. But now, I'm seeing a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to say, it was good, but it wasn't as great as Spider-Man 2. Now, I've been saying Spider-Man 2 has been the best comic book movie for the longest time. I mean, this is kind of a case of I told you so, but I'm not trying to say I told you so. So this article comes from The Observer, and it, like I said, it's titled Spider-Man Homecoming doesn't measure up to the 2004 masterpiece. There's no doubt about it. Spider-Man Homecoming is one of the most entertaining movies of the year, and I do agree with that. It's also one of the most accessible. True, to a fault almost. As Owen Gleiberman said from Variety, we have never seen a character with the myth of Spider-Man portrayed in such a user-friendly and after-school special way. Again, this is a positive and a negative. For the most part, it's a good thing, since many of us remember watching the Spider-Man cartoon after coming home from school. Herein lies the problem. Like I stated in an earlier video that I released this afternoon, the previous films were so great because they weren't based on the cartoon, they were based on the comics, which had years of development and long-form storytelling. Those types of stories lend themselves to better adaptations than a 23-minute toy commercial. Now back to the article. The performances in this film are also fantastic. Tom Holland makes a great Peter Parker and Spider-Man, as he greatly reflects the character from the original comic. Yes and no. He reflects the ultimate Spider-Man. And while he is fine, and I really don't have any dislike towards him, he's not Robert Downey Jr. good, okay? He's not J.K. Simmons good. He's not Christopher Reeve good. He's not Michael Keaton good. He's just fine. I wanted to say he's Chadwick Boseman good, but Chadwick Boseman made me really like the Black Panther. I always thought of him as a B-list character, which he truly is. Actually, he's at the top of the C-list, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. But he did such a good job portraying Black Panther that I respect Black Panther. I've always loved Spider-Man, and I lost respect for him during the Andrew Garfield run. That respect is back, but Tom Holland isn't in the same categories as other heavyweights, but he's good. Michael Keaton's performance as Adrian Toomes, a.k.a. the Vulture, outdoes most every superhero villain in existence. Yeah, he was great. I really don't have much to say. I love Michael Keaton. He's my favorite Batman. Jacob Batalon is charming as Peter's nerdy best friend Ned, and Laura Harrier mostly succeeds in her role as Peter's love interest Liz Allen, even though she's not given quite enough character development to work with. I don't think every character needs to be overly developed. Sometimes they just serve a purpose, like Liz. She's really kind of the plot point to bring the Vulture and Spider-Man together and make their battle a little more personal, which I'd like and I don't like. Real quick on a personal note, in Spider-Man Homecoming, when I thought that the Vulture answered the door, I thought it would have been really cool if he had already figured out his secret identity and he had kidnapped his girlfriend. He was going to torture her or something. Yeah, the element of him being her dad and the scene in the car was great. I'm not really going to knock that and take away points for what I thought would be cool and wasn't in the film. But personally, if I wrote the film, I would have liked that. Because we've never had that kind of reveal before. We've had the villain related to a friend of Peter. We had Harry and Norman as father and son, and Harry was his best friend. And, you know, it's fine. But if you're looking beyond the surface, there's not much else. It's a good film. However, in order to be great, a superhero film has to have a story so compelling it seems realistic, even though its characters have out-of-this-world powers. A perfect example of a film that combines entertainment and great storytelling is 2004's Spider-Man 2, which is possibly the best superhero movie to date. Again, I agree. If I were teaching an English class on story elements, it would be difficult to come up with a specific theme for Homecoming. However, the theme of Spider-Man 2 is clear from the beginning. With great power comes great responsibility. Even if the deceased Uncle Ben didn't appear in Peter Parker's dream to tell us this, the film spells it out. Peter Parker's power affects both his professional and personal life, and he has to make some ultimate sacrifices that the viewer identifies with. The biggest sacrifice he has to make is giving up his girlfriend Mary Jane Watson, because he doesn't want her to be hurt. The love story between Peter and Mary Jane is touching, sad, and poignant. One that you usually only expect from movies like Titanic or The English Patient. The scene where Mary Jane leaves fiancé John Jameson at the altar, finds Peter and tells him she wants to be with him despite his responsibilities is an exhilarating one, as many of the action scenes are. Unfortunately, there is no depth to the relationship in Homecoming, but perhaps the audience isn't looking for it. That's a really important point, a really important sense. The audience isn't looking for it. Like I've said in prior videos, like I've said on this podcast for years, the shit that comes out nowadays is very hollow and very plain and very boring. Spider-Man 2 has emotional depth, Spider-Man Homecoming does not. And people don't care because all they wanted out of a Spider-Man film was the jokes, the web shooters, and him to be young. Which, again, like I've said numerous times, he was only in high school for 4% of the comic books. The mechanical web shooters aren't the only thing that makes that power compelling. If he hasn't come out of his arm, why do you buy that he can climb the wall? Like, where's the disconnect? Just because it's not exactly how it is, like, being more accurate to a fault doesn't make it better. And, you know, people just don't, nowadays, with the internet and Twitter and Facebook and all these other types of social media, people don't care about the build-up, okay? I know I sound like an old fogey. I'm still in my 20s, so I'm not an old man, but honestly, when the first 3 Spider-Man movies came out, the internet and the world was a much different place. The first film came out in the post-9/11 wake. It was a really big breath of fresh air when that movie hit. Spider-Man 2 came out, people were excited, and it built upon that. And these movies nowadays don't give you enough things to build upon story-wise. They give you enough to build on for universe building. Universe building is not the same as story building. You know, the evolution of the relationship between Peter and Harry through Spider-Man's 1 through 3 is story development. But the Infinity Stones coming together for Thanos to use to fight the Avengers is universe development. While that is really cool and really exciting, and I've said on numerous occasions I'm pumped beyond belief for Avengers Infinity War, that isn't the main story of these films. Doctor Strange is about the story of Doctor Strange. Civil War is how the Avengers split. You know the stories of these films. In those films, they have less character development and less story development than Spider-Man 2. Now back to the article. Sam Raimi's 2004 version of Spider-Man doesn't project the feeling that he's tried too hard. The same can't be said about John Watts, who goes overboard with trying to thrill the Homecoming audience. Side note, I understand criticizing a director and praising a director, but in this case, I think John Watts is just a name, and it's Marvel and Sony that are really calling the shots. Now, I'm not trying to defend this guy for any of the film's shortcomings, because the film is good, but not great, like I've said. And yes, that blame could be put on the man's shoulders, but at the same time, it's not like a Sam Raimi situation where they went and basically gave him carte blanche to do whatever within reason. By the time Spider-Man 3 came on, we saw the studio interference, and that's why we have the kind of Spider-Man movie we have now. I don't want to sound morbid, but if Avi Arad were to die, and the people involved with Spider-Man over on the Sony home front would just fuck off, you would get a much better Spider-Man product. You'd have it be true to the comics, but at the same time be more realistic and more emotional and deeper. Like, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has emotional, deep moments. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. The whole Yondu subplot blew my mind. I found myself thinking about that movie for weeks because of how important they made it in the second film and how well it was done, you know? Like that line about, he may have been your father, but he ain't your daddy, and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, where did that come from? Like, where was this? And I'm so happy that it was there. I don't expect those types of moments from Spider-Man in the films nowadays. I expected those back in the day. Another side note real quick. Amazing Spider-Man number 600 is where Aunt May marries J. Jonah Jameson's father. I think his name's just J. Jonas, or just J. Jameson. There's a really nice scene where Peter finally makes it to the wedding on time, and him and Aunt May have this relation, or this talk, and at the end he just goes, "Thanks, Mom." Now that's like a comic book version of what we saw with Yondu in Guardians 2. We can't get that in Spider-Man Homecoming because, one, the film can't give it to us. You're saying, well, it's too early to decide. No. The emotional tone and the entire emotional balance has been there already. With Yondu, there was a relationship established in the first Guardians, and it only was elaborated on in the second film. We see the emotional structure of the world that Spider-Man Homecoming takes place in, and it doesn't lend itself to any of those emotionally powerful moments. Like in Spider-Man 2, when Aunt May says about how I believe there's a hero in all of us, and sometimes to do what is right, we must give up the thing we want the most. That's Spider-Man right there. That is not Sam Raimi's interpretation. That is the truest essence of the character boiled down to a few sentences. And everyone just wants to go on about how it's bad because Spider-Man's not talking a mile a minute. Well, first off, it's made for everyone. It's not made just for the kids. The kids will get in on the movie because of the toys and the merchandise and the colorful costumes. People, grown-ups, adults, need to have something that they can emotionally relate to. And that's what that movie does. This Spider-Man Homecoming is just a high school movie for kids that the kids aren't really interested in. And the reason I keep going back to Spider-Man 2's emotional elements is like, Tobey Maguire internalized it perfectly. When you watch Spider-Man on film, it's not supposed to be word balloon, because when you read him on paper, he can't do anything. He's just one static image, so the word balloons have to denote a change in emotion and the progression of a story. On film, an actor can internalize it, show emotion through physical movements and facial expressions. That's the beauty of acting that you don't get from a comic book. So when you basically take those things but internalize them and make them real, you're going to get a very true-to-life character. Just look at the scene where he's sitting on the step waiting for Mary Jane after the play, and he looks over and sees her kissing John Jameson, and you just see like the vigor sucked out of Peter. He tried so hard to do what he wanted, but he had to do what was right and stop that robbery from occurring, and it caused him to be late. The usher wouldn't let him in, and it just ruined his chances with Mary Jane, or so he thought. Now let me get back to the article, because I apologize, but this is very important to me, and this is Spider-Man month here on the channel, so probably not going to do Spider-Man related content for quite a while, so I'm just going to give you everything you can take, and then I'm done for a while. Back to the article. Spider-Man's AI-enhanced suit is the perfect example of something that seems like a good idea on paper, but doesn't quite work in the movie. The suit, which wasn't even designed by Parker himself, takes away from the enjoyment of the film by talking too much, and at times trying to outdo Peter. That's not to say that everything about 2004's Spider-Man is better than 2017's version. For one thing, the special effects in the 2000 movie look dated. No. Are we doing a whole, comparison? Because I think Spider-Man Homecoming for a 2017 film had some bad effects. When Spider-Man was jumping around a Blitzkrieg bop, I thought that looked really bad because he was so weightless. They don't really worry about the physics. With Spider-Man 2, there are shots that aren't perfect, but there are shots that are still incredible to this day. Even then, one could feel that some of the effects, especially with Spider-Man's web slinging throughout the city, were made using Adobe Okay, this writer had me up until this point, because they seemed like they were well-versed in how to tell a story, they knew about emotional resonance, but then they go on and say Adobe Flash. That's just stupid. While a few scenes in 2017's film look too digitally enhanced, most look impressively real. Disagree. Spider-Man never looks real in this movie, because he never is real. Of course, one can't really hold that against the 2004 film, which used the best technology that was available at the time. I watched Spider-Man 2 3 days ago. Still holds up in my opinion. Then there is humor. While there would be a smidgen of truth if someone said that Spider-Man 2 takes itself a little too seriously, the same isn't true about Homecoming, the funniest Spider-Man movie ever made. Not every Spider-Man story is funny. There is the hilarious scene where the waiter tries to hit on Aunt May by giving her free rice pudding, and another in which Peter attempts and fails to interrogate the Prowler. Who could forget Spider-Man's golf course run? Though Spider-Man the comedy wouldn't quite work, Homecoming offers just enough humor. It does, and I'm fine with all the humor in the movie. But it all depends on the story they're telling. Again, we gotta stop lumping in Spider-Man as being funny all the time. It's the problem that I have with many comic book fans. They assume because he's funny sometimes, he's funny all the times. Even in your holy grail of comic books, Ultimate Spider-Man, he's not that fucking funny. That's actually less funny than the 616 comic books, because the zingers aren't as good. Brian Michael Bendis is a fine writer, but he's not the best comic book writer of all time. He's no Stan Lee. And yes, I understand Stan Lee didn't do as much of the creating of Spider-Man as people like to think nowadays, but Stan Lee did write the dialogue. Ditko draw the stories and come up with a lot of the plotting elements, but Stan Lee did give Spider-Man the character. Stan Lee gave all the Marvel heroes the character that made them who they are. And Spider-Man's his greatest achievement. Spider-Man is Stan Lee's Mickey Mouse, except I'd say Spider-Man is much cooler than Mickey Mouse, and at this point more relevant. Hell, Spider-Man's been more relevant than Mickey Mouse since 1971, when the Spider-Man cartoon had just ended and it was now in syndication. This is just, Spider-Man's been a bigger deal. You know, Disney now owns him too, so that's that. But back to the article. Even though Spider-Man Homecoming isn't a masterpiece, it's still good enough to overcome the wreckage of The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel starring the unfortunate Andrew Garfield. This past weekend, the film grossed $117 million. However, Spider-Man Homecoming 2, set for release in 2019, will have to prove the first one wasn't a fluke. Perhaps John Watts should seek advice from Raimi on how to direct a successful sequel. I just really thought this article was important because it's telling that as soon as something underperforms, it's going to kind of get shit on. Because this article was published on the 14th of this month, so 3 days ago at the time of this recording. As I said, I liked Homecoming. I think it's the third best Spider-Man film, but this article kind of proves a point of how fickle geek culture is currently, and how I'm personally scared that this bubble's about to burst, because I'm not trying to sound like a martyr here, but I did grow up in an era where it wasn't cool to like comic books and Spider-Man. I remember I was in the 7th grade when the first Spider-Man movie came out, and I got shit on because I was excited for the movie. So I would draw Spider-Man every day. And I don't mean like one little picture. I'm talking I'd fill notebook pages with the mask and poses. Maybe one of these days I'll show some of the old artwork of Spider-Man I drew when I was a kid. But it was something that was important to me on so many levels. It was my favorite character finally getting a live-action interpretation. It was something I loved becoming a big deal again. It was just, to me, it was the most important movie experience ever. It's really the movie that got me into drawing and set me on the career path that I'm on now. I loved it. I thought it was great. The second one was better. The third one was not. And I can be honest about it. Just because it's associated with something that I love doesn't mean it's perfect. Spider-Man 2 is pretty damn close to perfect. I don't have many criticisms of the film, and it's not to say that I'm just trying to fanboy out and gloss over problems. I just don't think there are problems the same way a lot of people do. I know that Double Toasted put out a video last week that got a bunch of comments about how Spider-Man 3 is better than Spider-Man 2. It's not in any way. Like, I respect those dudes. I think they're funny. But if you guys were just doing that for a laugh, you really lost a lot of credibility, because Spider-Man 3 is just terrible. It shits the bed. It ruins a lot of stuff that came before it in the story. And it's not the worst Spider-Man film. I used to say it was the third best until Homecoming came out, and that's a good thing. I hope Homecoming 2 is good. I just basically want to say that I'm glad Spider-Man Homecoming was what it was. I just fear for the future and how we interpret and how our emotions can determine so many things instead of thinking things out logically.